This video is looking at factorizing algebraic expressions. And the process of factorization is the key step in simplification of many algebraic expressions. And it's the reverse process of expansion. So you should have experience with expansion or expanding algebraic expressions. And then factorization is doing that process in reverse. So if you were to have an expression like 3 outside of x plus 2, then that is the factorized form. And what you would be used to doing is expanding those brackets and getting an answer like 3x plus 6. That process is called expansion. And the process going back to the brackets is called factorization. So to be able to understand factorizing, we first need to be able to find the highest common factor of two terms or two numbers to begin with before we complicate it. So the highest common factor, let's say, of 6a and 8ab. So what can we see that's common between let's just look at the coefficients. So we're only looking at the numbers to begin with. So the highest common factor between 6 and 8. Well, to get 6, you can have 2 and 3, 3 and 2, 1 and 6, 6 and 1. To get 8, you can have 1 and 8, 8 and 1, 4 and 2, 2 and 4. So the only numbers here that are common are 1 and 2. So that's the highest common factor because 2 is obviously higher than 1. So you would say the highest common factor of 6a and 8, well, firstly, is going to be 2. But then we also have these pronumerals. So what is common between a and ab? Well, hopefully you're able to say, well, it's just a. Because 6a does not have a b, so it's not common. So 2a is the common factor between 6a and 8ab. If we look at something a little bit more complicated like 3x squared and 6xy. Now the the coefficients of 3 and 6, well, that should be pretty straightforward. The highest common factor is going to be 3. And if you're going to draw your factor tree, it'd be a pretty short one. 1 and 3, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. So it's quite obvious that 3 is your highest common factor. But then what about the pronumerals? So the highest common factor here is going to be 3 something. Well, here we have x squared, and here we have xy. So this is x times y, and this one is x times x. So obviously, x is the common factor. So 3x is your highest common factor. Now, those are two examples where there's no operation. It's just finding the highest common factor between two terms. So in this next example, let's put an operation in. Let's say 40 minus 16b. Now, is there a common pronumeral? No, there's not. 40 does not have an A, a B, a C, or all the way through to Z. 16 has a B, but that's irrelevant at this point because 40 doesn't have a pronumeral. 40 is a constant. 16b has a coefficient. We can find a common factor between 40 and 16. Now, if you're not confident with your factors, then write them out in table form like I have been, because if you were to choose a factor that is not the highest, then you're going to get the question wrong. So let's start off with 1 and 40, 2 and 20. 3 doesn't go into 40, but we can go 4 and 10. We can also go 5 and 8. 16, we go 1 and 16, 2 and 8, or 4 and 4. So here's an example where we have 1, 2, 3, 4 factors, but only one of them is the highest common factor, and that is 8. So 8 is the highest common factor of this question. but we haven't factorized it yet. We've just identified. So now we go, well, 8 times what will give you 40? 8 times 5 will give you 40. 8 times what will give you negative 16b. 8 times negative 2 will give you negative 16. And 8 times b will give you, 8 times negative 2b will give you negative 16b. And that is the factorization process for a simple expression. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, we're going to have negative 8x squared minus 12x. So here, the highest common factor is negative 4x. So, and I've jumped ahead there, but if you use the same process that we have been, where we look for the highest common number factor and then look for the common pronumeral or letter factors, then you would eventually get to the conclusion that negative 4x should sit outside the brackets, and then 2x plus 3 will sit inside the brackets. And something that I should have led with is your common factor, your highest common factor, or your highest common term sits outside the brackets. And then it multiplies into the brackets as to what would equal the term above it. So negative 4x is your common factor. We have negatives that are common between our two terms. 4 is our highest common factor between our two sets of numbers, coefficients in this case, and x is common between our two sets of pronumerals. That sits outside the brackets. Then we go, how can negative 4x equal negative 8x squared? Well, if we multiply it by 2, we get 4 to equal 8. And if we multiply the x by x, we get x squared. Now on this side, we have to have negative 12x. So to keep it as a negative, because we've already got a negative 4, it needs to be a positive number. And then how do we get 4 to equal 12? Multiply it by 3. And we don't need to have an x because we have an x in our original term, in our common term out the front here.